This is a big country. And that's why all of my hope about Kamala is also accompanied by some genuine fear. Fear for our country. Fear for our children. Fear for what is coming our way if we forget the stakes in this election. And y'all, that's why I'm here today. And y'all know I hate politics. But I hate to see folks taken advantage of even more. So I wanted to do everything in my power to remind the country that I love, that there's too much we stand to lose if we get this one wrong.
Hi, I'm Ana Marie Cox. This is 90 Days with Ana Marie Cox. We've been counting down the election since 85 days to go, because there's 5 days until this election. Early voting is open, I think, everywhere. Go vote, go bank your vote, go bank your vote, go bank your vote. If only because people will stop bothering you about it over text and phone if you do that. So this is a show where we've been counting down the election and talking to people about what they think in the middle of this wild, unprecedented, historic, surprising, mind-melting campaign. But today we're doing something slightly different. I'm going to be talking to Emily Hauser. She is a social justice activist who has been really drilling down on how to talk to what she calls gettable voters. And we're going to talk about what that means and about what she's learned and what she tries to talk to other people about right now. Emily, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
I am really happy to have you on because I think this is something, I know this is something that a lot of people have been thinking about and having anxiety about, which is there is some population of gettable voters. Now, it might be small, right? And I appreciate that you maybe distinguish them from undecided voters, right?
Yep.
So talk about what this project is and what you've been advising people who are interested and maybe trying to incorporate some of this into how how they deal with what's going on.
Well, exactly. And that honestly is one of our first jobs right now. People like us, we have to be supporting other people like us because we're all losing our mind. Generally speaking. I'm going to go back a little bit just to talk about my background to explain why I think I can offer this to people. I've been in comms for most of my professional life, in part because I was a reporter and a freelance commentary writer, neither of which paid well. So I was doing paying work. And then ultimately, like a decade ago, I was like, yeah, this is unsustainable. And like a lot of journalists switched over to comms full time. And I have done communication work for politicians, for progressive nonprofits, for big comms shops. So I have a lot of lived and learned experience with persuasion, right? How do we persuade people? And it's a skill that I have that a lot of people don't have, right? And it's a thing that terrifies people. How can I tell someone I don't like what they're thinking and I want them to think differently, right? And usually our go-to is yell, which is not helpful in this moment, right? No one is changing their vote because someone yelled at them right now, right? Or deciding to vote because someone yelled at them. So, and then the other thing about me is that I've been canvassing and generally volunteering in Democratic campaigns for, at this point, decades. And I have always thought of myself as I'm knocking on the doors that another 10 people can't knock on because they have a disability, they have 2 full-time jobs, they have 3 little kids, any reason whatsoever. I'm not the one who's going to judge that reason, but I'm knocking on the door for those 10 people as well, not just me. And I got COVID in March 2020, and it was one of those mild cases that had me isolated for nearly 3 months, and I had a low-grade fever that whole time. So my brain is basically soup, so maybe you shouldn't be talking to me at all. But aside from that, I was sitting at this desk or in lying in that bed when the George Floyd murder occurred and all the uprisings were set off. And I couldn't march. I couldn't go out. I just couldn't. And so, and I now have long COVID, and I can't go canvassing today. I don't. It's just not a thing I can do. And that has been a thing that I've had to come to terms with, which I think is a thing we all ultimately have to come to terms with. And I'm going to be answering your question in like 2 seconds.
I like setting the table this way because one thing that's come up occasionally on the show from various guests and my own experience is the degree to which we all have trauma from the last few years and that it has been memory hold. I even think that people on the right, some of this extremism, maybe all of this extremism, is tied up with unprocessed trauma. That sounds really woo-woo, psychobabble-y, and I'm not saying I forgive them, but it's a good thing to ground, right?
Right. It helps to start with, to be like, oh, one reason there's no arguing with this person is because they are in this place, right? Like, I wish I could feel compassion for Donald Trump. What a childhood he must have had. Unfortunately, he allowed himself and continued to be a monster, though a human monster, and we're all suffering as a result. So no compassion for me, but I wish I could, right? But so
but let's talk about how this is all setting the table for how we talk to those gettable.
So for me, one of the things that I'm doing with this personally created project is answering my own unease with the fact that I can't do what I used to do. And no one can do everything right now, right? I think that we have, in America in particular, such a strong, our society loves individualism and loves great man history and noticeably men. But those things are not true about democracy. Democracy is a collective effort that needs everybody. And I have to be able to trust that you're doing something that I don't have time or capacity to do. And one of the reasons that I think there are gettable votes is because a lot of people don't vote. We don't even talk about the people. I don't know, what is it? At best, we get 70% turnout. So there are a lot of people who just aren't even in the way of thinking yet. So what I've done under the sort of understanding that we knock on 1,000 doors to get one vote is I created this resource that is a Google Doc. It's nothing fancy, but I led with, basic links and basic information, basic questions, essentially an FAQ, and talking points, which is a phrase that people don't like, but all talking points are guide rails to how to communicate. Here are ideas that might work. Here are ways to say it. So one thing I suggest in this thing is you're not trying to shame someone because their father voted for Trump in 2020. You're trying to allow them in despite the fact that they feel weird about that, right? So you raise it and you talk about it in a certain way. But more to the point, as far as I'm concerned, is two things. Everybody listens better when they're talking to someone they know, right? Like your Aunt Melissa is going to listen to you far sooner than she's going to listen to some stranger on her doorway or, a postcard in her mailbox, right? She's going to listen to you a lot faster. And also, we don't always know what is keeping that person from Indivisible, from the Harris campaign, from any other more organized, I'm pretty organized, but more organized activity. And my assumption is that reaching out the way I have been kind of incessantly with this document that I keep updating, but it's only like 5.5, 6 pages long. It's nothing crazy, big margins. My assumption is that I am reaching people. The 1,000 doors that I'm knocking on are people who don't know where to begin, don't know if they can trust strangers that they've never worked with before, don't have any idea how to talk to their Aunt Melissa or their Uncle Frank. And so they need a key to unlock the door, or the door to be opened a little. And that's what I'm trying to do. That's what this, I started it before Kamala Harris was, before Kamala Harris, because I was in a state of particular despair. And I just got in touch with a bunch of friends who I often canvass with. Can't this year, they're canvassing their butts off. And I was like, let's talk about this. How can we all reach out to the people we know in swing states and whatnot? And then Kamala Harris made things different, but we absolutely have to reach out to people in swing states and swing districts, because as we all keep saying, this is an election that will depend on turnout and margins. And if it's a blowout, oh my God, that's even better. But we can't possibly bank on that.
So let's take this from the top for someone who is listening to the show and the time for sending those postcards and letters has passed. I'm, believe it or not, kind of an introvert about this stuff myself. Like, I don't want to call strangers. I don't want to even text strangers, because I know how I feel when I get calls and texts from strangers.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But I've written my letters. It's 5 days. I want to do something. Talk me through what it is that I might be able to do.
Well, first of all, make a mental list or a physical list, I don't care. Make a mental list of people actually know in those worrisome states and worrisome districts, because we really need to take the House and keep the Senate. We don't really have the Senate. It's just because of the 50-50 thing, but we need to do both. So, and reach out to those people, obviously only if it's safe. Like, you're not going to reach out to someone who you know is abusive. You're not going to reach out to someone who you know, whatever. You do things that are safe. You don't do unsafe things. But you reach out to those people.
So I'm going to break it down super, super simple, because I know when I get overwhelmed, I have to have it be real simple. So what I hear and feel like I could break down was, I get out my phone and I do, because you can search your contacts. So I do search for Ohio, Pennsylvania, Nevada, whatever, get a list of swing states, because there may be people I don't know, right? So do a search for that area code, do a search for that state. I might have family or whatever, because I'm also in a nervous state, so I'm going to forget stuff. So to break it down to the absolute smallest steps, I see if I have those people in my life, right? Then if it's me, I'm going to write down the list. I'm going to write down a list of those folks. I'm going to cross out people I don't feel safe, right? Whatever, people who have had bad interactions before, people who have shouted at me before, whatever. And then I'm going to send them a text. And what do you advise, or call, but what do you advise to be that very first thing that I do when I reach out to one of these people?
I know we don't talk about politics very much.
Hey, so-and-so.
Yeah, you acknowledge the elephant in the room. We don't talk about this for whatever reason. You don't have to say why. I know we don't talk about this, but I'm really worried about. And then you decide what is something that will catch that person's attention. I'm really worried about abortion rights. I'm really worried about cost of insulin. Something that, and if it might be, I'm really worried about the democracy, right? But pick out something that will speak to that person and say, and I'm worried enough that I want to talk to you about this. And do you need help finding out if you're registered? Do you need help? And And this document that I created, which we can share in some way, however you
Yeah.
want to share it, you have it.
Yeah.
It also has a variety of like, if it's almost like a flow chart, if this, then this, if this, then that. And you need to be, and this is sometimes the hardest part, we need to be our authentic selves. We can't have that, I'm trying to tap dance to make you happy and help this be smooth. We have to be like, I'm actually worried and I need you to know that. And here's a way that you could help make this worry go away by doing this thing that needs to be done. Or you don't think you could do this thing to make my worry go away. You judge your relationship with that person accordingly.
Right. So in my previous life podcasting, my previous podcast, I did a whole series on conversion experiences.
Oh, uh-huh.
And like the context for them and how they happen and what kind there are. And it was kind of low key about de-radicalization. But I was also curious about how people get radicalized. But one of the things I learned was, it's deeper than confirmation bias. It is what happens when we are presented with information that runs counter to our previously held beliefs. We dig down further. Like, if you are presented with evidence that you were wrong on some level, you're gonna
And now the easiest thing is
you're gonna just double down. And the other thing that I learned was that the best way to kind of open people up about their experience or get people open to changing their mind is ask them about their experience in general. So like for me, when I hear you talk about that, like a couple things occur to me. One is, so I make that list. If I do the search and make the list, I cross out people I'm not going to talk to. Then maybe I write down I have to have stuff written down or else I'm going to forget it. Right. So I write down, what am I worried about? Right. Like, what's a list of things that what's my menu of list of things that I could open up about? And then I think, and you tell me, you're the communications person. You tell me, I say, so I'm actually going to use a specific example, which is my mother-in-law. Pat, we don't talk much about politics, but I'm really worried about this election. I'm worried about, women's health care. She's older, probably wouldn't use the word abortion. Where are you?
Or prescription drug prices.
Where are you with this?
Yeah.
Like, how are you feeling? Right. And then I feel like that's going to be like, she usually, because they're people who love each other, right? She's going to be like, what about you? Like,
yeah.
How are you?
Absolutely.
And then I get to say, then I'm going to the next part in the flow chart, which is what?
Well, it depends on how she responds. I mean, imagine yourself at a door talking to someone you don't know. They might say, yeah, I'm worried about that, but I don't have time right now. Or I'm worried about that. Tell me more. Or, whoa, what are you talking about? Right. So you then have to respond to how they respond. So, it's active listening. Right. And she says, I don't know. Yeah, I'm worried about that, but why do we have to talk about politics?
That is probably what she would say. I could actually play out this if you want. So I'm going to pretend to be her. And she texts back to me, oh, Ana, it's so nice to hear from you. But, our relationship is based on something besides politics. How are you doing? I'm sorry, or whatever. She's like, I love you so much. Let's not talk about something we might disagree about. Right. So what can I say to that?
Well, and
she does care about me. Let's posit, like, she's really genuinely caring.
Yeah.
Like, let's hope that that's a relationship that exists for people.
Oh, for sure. And sometimes it's even the knock-on effect because Pat or Aunt Melissa is along for the ride, but you want them to be able to communicate to somebody else. But to get back to the actual woman you're talking about, and your relationship and her response, I think that if it were me, I would say, well, how I am is actually really anxious because I'm really seeing this alternate reality in which X that resonates for her and for you plays out.
I'm going to say mental health care access, prescription drug, like all that stuff, because she knows that that's me, right? She knows that I am in recovery and all that. I mean, other people are going to have other mental or physical healthcare stuff. So I'm like, I'm worried about access. I'm going to be like, I have a pre-existing condition. Like I have a chronic disease and a pre-existing condition. And so if Obamacare gets repealed, I mean, obviously this is all text. So like, I'm not
Right.
doing the play acting,
Right.
but like,
But that's what you want to convey, right? So how do you convey
right,
that in words? With your thumbs.
right,
Yeah.
right. Okay, so I say back to her, like, I'm like, I've got a pre-existing condition, and I know people you love do too.
Yeah. So even though this is uncomfortable, and believe me, it's uncomfortable for me too, I'm actually actively asking you to do this thing.
Mhm.
And if you think someone is gettable, and here's another flowchart thing, if you think someone is gettable for Harris over Trump, but will not have the rest of the conversation, to my mind, good enough, move on. Dianu, you've got what you need. And who knows what's going to happen in the next few days in their brain, right? If they're like, oh yeah, Trump, I'm definitely voting for Harris. But that's probably, you sense that that's all they're thinking about. Go down, add, and we really need to get the House and keep the Senate. So I'm actually also asking you to vote Democrats all the way down. And and I will now interject into my own little lecture. This is scary for us, right? There's a reason it makes us anxious. And for me, I reached out to someone, and this is part of it also, share whatever you have or how you would do it with other people in those swing states and districts who might not have thought about it, right? So I did this with a friend of mine in one of the swing states who I know that their spouse is to the right of them and that they are uncomfortable talking about politics in general, partly because of that. And I was like, you know what? This person matters so much to me. I don't want to lose them. But this is bigger than that right now. And that's a hard thing to say, but it's true. And so that has helped me that helped me hit send on that email. This is actually bigger than that. And if I lose this person over that, well, maybe we weren't supposed to be lifelong friends in the first place, right?
And life is long. Life is really long. And, I'm old enough at this point to have friends that I have lost and then regained.
Yep.
And so I think it's important to keep that narrative in your head,
and part of how you keep it is by speaking to them in a way that's compassionate and listening to them and making yourself vulnerable so that they don't feel they're being lectured or whatever, anything unpleasant. You're like, I love you and I'm sharing this with you because we're in a loving relationship or a friendly or whatever your relationship is. I'm trusting that enough to be vulnerable with you is the subtext.
I'm just going to keep, because I'm a list person, so I'm just going to keep kind of doing this. So, all right. So let's just play this out with Pat, who, by the way, I'm probably not going to actually text her because she's not in a swing state. And I feel like that's okay. And I'm not going to beat myself up just because I didn't reach out to the one person I think is gettable, but she happens to be in a totally blue state. But that was a good practice for me to kind of run through.
And you really don't have to throw yourself on the sword for the people who are already in safe areas, right?
Right.
Go ahead.
Right.
I'm sorry, I interrupted.
But it was a good thought experiment for me. And now I'm going to do the thought experiment of pretending. All right. So I got to, let's pretend she wasn't, or Aunt Melissa, whatever. So I got to saying, this is big. This is big. This is a big thing for me. So I'm just going to make you this ask, even though it's uncomfortable. Could you consider turning out for Harris? And let's pretend she says, I will think about it. And I do. And she's like, and I'm sorry you're struggling, which to me is an opening for me saying, I really am. And I'm just going to add, since you are still texting with me.
Yeah.
If you can vote down ballot, also, that is a thing that I need to ask you to do. All right. Sorry about the Giants. Sorry about the Giants. Better luck next year. At least Aaron Rodgers sucks. The end. All right. So I go down to the next person in my list. But before I do that, maybe what I do is I text a fellow, I asked a friend who's just a really good friend, and I'm like, okay, all right. You know what? I just did the thing. I just did it. I just did the thing.
And I'm trying to not recurl up under my desk, but my heart's going really fast. So yeah, absolutely. We have to do that for each other.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then I wonder if there's a part on that decision tree where you reach out to somebody who's in a swing state and is a reliable voter, but maybe they know people and neighbors and whatnot.
I have done exactly that. I've sent this thing to family with whom I've never discussed politics because we don't need to. We're all on this. I literally, very literally, in my personal circles of vulnerability, know maybe one person who has voted Republican and won't be this time, right? So I'm definitely in that bubble, which is a lovely bubble. But so I have 100% sent this thing to friends and family in other states saying, please use this, please share it. One of my friends in Wisconsin was like, oh my God, thank you so much. I've shared this a million times and I haven't heard back from some people. And that is the 1,000 doors, right? The 1,000 doors are, you never know which person's going to say, oh my God, thank you for coming. I need help getting to the polls. Can you arrange that for me? Right? That's the, you never know.
Yeah.
So
you reach out to the people, anyone you know in swing state's probably a good person. And then also, you might want to be, we've never talked about politics. I know you're a Democrat. I'm going to make you this ask.
Right.
My ask is, I'm so scared and I know it's scary for you too. Do you have a neighbor or a bowling league buddy?
Your book club. Yeah.
Book club. And I'm just going to ask you, this is a person you don't have to ask to vote. I'm going to ask you if you could just,
here's a resource that will help you.
Yeah.
And they will or they won't, right? We can't,
right.
I come from a long line of alcoholics, some of whom were in recovery and some of whom weren't. So I am not myself in recovery, but I am very well aware of the 12-step philosophies. And we are not responsible for what that other person does or even what they think. We are only responsible for what we bring to them. And, even we tend to say it's not my, in 12-step circles, that's not my business. Actually, right now, it's kind of our business because we're talking about, but we're not responsible for it by a long shot. We can only do what we can do.
Well, I think, there are other kinds of recovery besides sobriety, right? There's emotional sobriety. There's Al-Anon. I'm in another program. I'm in another program that's not Al-Anon, but it is, it's related. But a thing that we talk about in this other 12-step program is boundaries. But a thing that some people don't understand what about another boundary, another kind of boundary isn't don't do this. It's asking for what you need, but then letting go.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It's to make the ask. It's to say, this is something that would be helpful to me. So I'm going to ask you.
And you get to make the decision. Yeah, the other person gets to make the decision.
I love you no matter what is a thing that I have said, which is true, right? It's really great when you can say that to somebody. It may not be appropriate for everyone, right? But
I care for you.
Our friendship won't be affected by this. There are cases where it might,
but yeah, when you can say that kind of follow up, it's helpful for both sides, I think, for you and
yeah.
for me.
So I'm going to make this ask. I know it's tough. And I love you no matter what. And I'm here for you no matter what. If you want to talk about this some more, you know. And I also think that when it comes to recovery and 12 steps, there is a higher power kind of, my higher power does for me what I cannot do, but my higher power asks me to do for myself what I can.
I
Like,
mean, that's the serenity prayer in
yeah,
different words, right? Like, the courage to know the difference, or the wisdom to know the difference, is the most important line. I once heard that my mom allowed me before she died to talk about the fact that she was in sobriety she was in recovery for like not that long, 40 years, 35 years. And the whole thing, she's allowed me to talk about it. So about her, I can say, I once shared with her and she was like, no, that's not right. And I'm like, listen to the end. God grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, the courage to change the people I can, and the wisdom to know that that's me.
yeah, that is the program that I'm. One of the programs that I'm in is that, and I think that that is valuable in terms of thinking about how we deal with election anxiety. Right? Is what I can do, what I can do, what I can do, what I
And
can do.
sometimes the answer is nothing
Yeah,
because you're
right. Powerless.
scared.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Feel the feelings. Feel the
No feeling.
feelings.
I also had this thing about despair is a luxury we can't afford. It is not a luxury. It happens. And when we call it a luxury, we don't help people get past it. If you're feeling despairing, I understand. I have been in your place, and come back when you're ready to regroup. You know?
I write for a worker-owned publication called Flaming Hydra. Everyone subscribe. It's we all own our work for it. It's a writers cooperative, cooperative, because people also are photographers and cartoonists and artists and whatnot. And I consider myself the despair correspondent, which means I write about politics and mental health.
Yep.
I report from the front lines of
The
hopelessness.
front lines of despair, of politics and mental health.
And I've sort of gotten a chance to write about politics, but one of the things that I feel strongly about is to not judge yourself for feeling despair, and to not judge yourself for feeling hopeless, and to know that that is something that can pass, right? And in my own life, I've been able to see that, right? Like, if anyone who is listening, and I'm guessing it's something like a third of the people in the US have been diagnosed with depression at some point in their lives, but that's diagnosed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's so let's consider that number larger. If you've ever been depressed and then not,
That was real. That was not more real than the depression. That is equally real. And that's the trick. Figuring out that the joy is equally real to the despair. Neither is more honest. Neither is more real.
and that joy and despair will continue to exist no matter who wins. And the work is never done. And the feelings keep happening, and life keeps happening. And we're getting super
Well, but this is what it's about, right? At bottom line, I mean, I think politics is your morals in action. I think the personal is the political, and the political is the personal. I think all of those things. I think they're all true. So we feel these things in our personal lives. They affect our relationships, whether or not we're aware of them, whether or not we know it and acknowledge it. So maybe let's acknowledge it, so then we can get past it.
And I feel like we're hearing this from people like Michelle Obama, Barack Obama, and Tim Walz. I think Harris has been less kind of on the I know you're feeling hopeless, but let's go.
Well, because
That's not her role.
She has
right?
to perform.
Yeah, that's not her role.
Victory.
But one of the reasons we love the Tim Walz is, and I've been thinking about masculinity a lot in terms of Tim Walz, and why he seems to just break the brains of conservatives in terms of masculinity. And he's been accused of being a groomer or being gay. And it's because he has feelings
and openly loved his son.
Has feelings, right?
Yep.
And is vulnerable, and will get up there and say, I know we're feeling hopeless. I know, I don't think he's hopeless. He's like, I know we're feeling bad. I know that the feelings are happening. When you think about it, this is actually what a coach does in general, right? But a coach can, in the context of sports, for some reason, it's okay to acknowledge.
Yeah, I mean, we could do an entire docu-series on toxic masculinity and its role in all of this, but
Right. Well, people who are covering this election are doing like a low key documentary, like
no,
a
absolutely.
secret documentary about toxic masculinity. But I do think this is an important, because also the solution to all of this, and this is the thing that you hear from Barack Obama, and Michelle Obama and Tim Walz and AOC and all those people. There's, Barack Obama's famous, and it's cliche, don't boo vote. I mean, eh, although I think it's boo and vote. I think
Yes.
that's the way that we.
I'm like, sir, I'm capable of both. I contain multitudes.
and but the advice to do is totally like the way that you get out of just a continuous boo. Like, you don't want to just boo.
Yeah, and then really think that you're dehydrated from it. And yeah.
So you do what you can, and I think this is where this comes in. This is where I just think of all the different interactions that you have in your life where you can see it as doing the thing that you can do to help save democracy. And I believe it can be as simple as, like, I just texted a friend of mine who I know is really, safe blue state, Democrat from day one, more Democrat than I am. Like, how are you? Like, how you
We have,
doing with all this?
yeah,
You know?
we have to be aware, and that's also one of the things that we do when we're not booing.
Right.
When we share compassion with each other and with ourselves, that's healing.
And I think it's different than doomerism. I think to ask someone how they're doing with all this, which sometimes I feel like that's a good frame because it opens up.
And which this? There are so many thises. Just yeah.
Let them, whatever. It doesn't have to be a thing where you then follow each other down, doom. It can just be in the, like, how are you doing space. And here, this is a thing that I have done in conversations with friends who I know are really caught up in it, is like, so what I've been, here's what I've been feeling and what I've been doing. And taking care of yourself is important. Like, I have my ability to care for myself has been affected by all this, right? And I'm sure that's true for listeners.
I think probably so. Yeah.
Have you eaten today?
I forget to eat, and late in the afternoon I'll be like, why am I losing my mind today? Oh, because all I've had is a piece of toast, and it was. So yeah. Have you eaten? Have you had water? Have you taken your meds?
Yep. Have you taken your meds? Because you know what? When you text those folks about whether you're going to vote, you don't want to be hangry.
That is correct. Like, deal with the hanger first. Then, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, deal with the hanger, and then this really does all connect together. I feel strongly about it. Like, you do the self-care so you can do the work that you can do and the service, and then you do what you can, and then you can tap out. We were talking yesterday about whether or not the right, and I'm using quote marks with my hands for these who are listening, the right thing to do is unsubscribe from the post. And I at first was saying, like, here's my thing is, I think no, because I want to support my friends that work there. And also they're doing really great reporting about the thing that happened. But then I saw 250,000 people. unsubscribed. And I was like, you know what? Sure. Like, once it becomes this focused and mass movement, like I'll throw in, and you know what? I'll resubscribe down the line. And that is okay too, because you do what you can, right?
I use my subscription for good. I share gift links wildly.
Yeah, I think, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. There is no completely correct way to live under capitalism. I enjoy Marvel movies. I know the carbon footprint of a Marvel movie, you know. But at the same time, that is one of the ways, I hate to refill my cup kind of metaphors, but that is one of the ways that I am able to move forward in the world, is like a good hero story, right? So I think this is all coming back to what you can do to reach out to voters to try and get them gettable voters, people you have relationships with. And I will remind people, I think folks who listen to this podcast probably know, but the most effective way to get people to vote is relational outreach. Is how if you personally know someone, you have a better chance of,
It's
of
just
converting them.
Think about yourself and your own interactions, and you already know that, right? Like who you'll listen to versus. I do want to say one thing before we finish up, because I know there's been a lot of discussion around the word hope on your podcast recently. And I wanted to share a thing that one of the rabbis at the services that I attended, by which I mean I streamed on, I want to say it was Yom Kippur that she said this. It doesn't matter. I think it was Yom Kippur. It might have been Rosh Hashanah. That she thinks of optimism as a random gift of neurobiology that allows you to feel that someday it'll work out. Whereas hope is the knowledge that if we do the work, things can change. And when she said that, the title of Barack Obama's The Audacity of Hope suddenly made sense to me, right? Like, I'm like, whatever, man, well, I'll just do the work. Oh, hope is a verb, and it's an awareness that if we do the work, things can change. So
I loved Emily's shift from, not you, Emily Atkins, sorry, shift from using hope to using the word courage, because I think courage is easier to summon than hope.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. I'm afraid, but I'm going to do it anyway. That's a thing that we all have access to.
Right. And I think also for me, hope is not a bad word, but it does need to be reframed. I've sometimes talked about optimism. I love it to talk about it as a gift, but the thing that in my personal journey has been optimism is there's no one more optimistic than an active alcoholic.
That is true. That is true. I have lived experience that can support you on that. Yes.
It'll be different this time.
Yeah.
Things will work out somehow.
Somehow. Yeah.
But and so I like the reframing of it is slightly like is not demented, which sometimes that's for me, optimism can be a little demented, but it isn't. It's not reframed is good. But hope is a thing that is related to faith and related to action and related to doing what you can. So I'm going to remind people, you have a Google Doc. We will link to it in the show description. And it is helpful tips and a kind of decision tree flowchart for how to talk to people who are gettable on some level to vote for Harris and perhaps also down ballot. I'm going to say in Texas, you got to just go through all 50 choices. I did it yesterday. Like,
just got to be done.
Just going down to like Lost Creek Recreation Board.
Yeah, I used to play some of those, and now I'm like, nope. I got to set everybody up on the right trajectory. Yeah.
School board. Oh, and Also important to note that there are probably other places, but Vote Save America has a place where you can pre-do your ballot so that you can like know who on the Lost Creek Recreation Board you might want to vote for. And that you can take on paper with you into the ballot box. Also, everyone should look up what the regulations are about wearing campaign-related stuff. I had my Sonic Youth homage Harris Walz t-shirt, but I wore a sweatshirt over it. And I don't know, any other last tips you think we can offer people about the next
5 freaking days? Yes, actually, I do have one more. And I will lead by saying I hate phone banking. I hate phone banking. I can knock out a million doors if Blanco will let me. Phone banking, I hate. I phone bank on election day, and I actually decided to just take the day off so I could do that, because that's getting out the vote. That's not randos. That's not persuadables. That's people that the Democrats in your area know are registered and likely to vote and haven't voted yet. So you're calling people and saying, have you voted? And if they say yes, you've removed that from another list that someone else is trying to chase down that day.
I'm writing it down. I don't want to do it. I was going to also vote curing.
Yep, vote curing also. And see, this is a good example of a choice that I've made. Vote curing makes me personally nervous, like me. So, but phone banking less on election day, way less. Okay, fine. I'll phone bank on election day. Pick the thing that works for you. There are a million things.
Also, totally okay. Again, it's all what you can do, and you do what you can do in the moment. So maybe you can do something. I'm not going to say even use the word more later. You do what you can do in the moment, and the thing you may be able to do in the next moment or the next day is something different. It all counts. It is no like doing more and doing less. It's all about intention. If your intention is to be a part of this,
well, and a mass movement is as famously said, a mass of people moving. Every single person has to be in that movement, but they're not doing the same thing, right? A mass movement is all of us, which means that each of us has to be there, but we're not all handing out snacks or raising the flag or whatever we do when you're in a mass movement. I don't know, on the ground, but I'm picturing like Moses and the Israelites. It's not working for me right now, but you know what I'm saying.
I do. And thank you so much for being with us, Emily Hauser, social justice activist. And she has a Google document about getting gettable voters. And it is 5 days until the election. This has been 90 days with Ana Marie Cox. It has been 85 days. Now 5 days. We have plans to continue the show after day 0, which, I'm just going to say, I hope it's a limited run. We might do something else related to this afterwards. I hope so. But we will be doing negative days. It's making me emotional to think about that. This is a podcast where you get your podcast. It's a YouTube show where you get your YouTubes. Rate, review, share, subscribe, tell your friends and neighbors when you're doing your outreach. Be like, vote for Kamala Harris. And then also, if you heard about this great show, 90 Days with Ana Marie Cox. And thank you again, Emily, for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
8 days to go. This election's already started. People are voting across the country. And so you know what it means. This is where I've got to do it. Huddling up a little bit here. Time for a little bit of a pep talk. Look, we got to admit it. This game is tied. 2 minutes left on the clock. We got the ball. We're driving down the field. We're doing the blocking and everything we need to do. And I know you got a saying around here that came from Bo. The team, the team, the team. And boy, do we have the right team. So all gas, no brakes for the next 8 days. Plenty of time to sleep when you're dead.